My dear students and viewers, this is Puranjay Biswas, Professor and Chairman, Department of English, Dhaka College, affiliated with the University of Dhaka. I welcome you to my today's lecture on Introduction to Linguistics for the third year students. I have selected my today's topic on language, its definitions and characteristics. My dear students, as you know that language is the means of communication through which human beings exchange their verbal and symbolic utterances. And through language, we express our feelings, emotions, thoughts and ideas. But it is true that the study of language is very much difficult and vast. It is so vast and so complex and complicated that it has become a difficult subject to study. The scholars wishing to study the origin and evaluation of language have to depend on different inferences because of the lack of direct evidence. They have to depend on fossil records, anthropological sources, contemporary language diversity, its synchronic and diachronic aspects, and so on. We know that because of this difficulty, this subject has become almost unsuitable for the scholars. Thinking so, in 1866, the Linguistic Society of Paris abandoned all their projects and explorations regarding the issue of the origin of language and its evolutionary emergence. My dear students, at first, let me discuss the origin of language, its nature, its function, and its characteristics. My dear students, now let me focus on the etymological origin of the word language. The English word language has derived from Old French word language, which means words or speech, largely language. And this Old French word language has come from the Latin root, and that word is lingua. And the Latin word lingua means tongue, referring to words, speech, and largely language. So, language means all the utterances made by a community to exchange their views, emotions, thoughts and ideas. Now let me mention some important definitions given on language by the famous linguists of the world. My students, at first we can mention the definition given by Aristotle. one of the greatest and oldest Greek philosophers. According to Aristotle, speech is the representation of experiences of the mind. By this, Aristotle means that language means species of our mind. That is, through language, we exchange our emotions, our feelings, and experiences of our mind. Then we can discuss another definition given by Edward Sapi, who is a famous American linguist. According to him, language is a purely human and non-instinctive method of communication, of communicating ideas, emotions, and desires by means of voluntarily produced symbols. And through this definition, we can know some features of language. That is, language is purely human. That is, the sounds made by either beasts or birds or insects cannot be included in language. It must be essentially human. Then, language is non-instinctive. It means that language doesn't come automatically. Or rather, we have to acquire, learn language voluntarily. We use language deliberately to exchange our views, our emotions. Then another important linguist is Leonard Bloomfield, who is also an American earlier linguist. According to him, the totality of the utterances that can be made in a speech community is the language of that community. From this definition, the main focus that we can know that here, that language is utterances and it is involved in a community. That is, there is social, cultural background of language. Now let me mention another definition of language given by Abraham Noam Chomsky. And you know that Chomsky is called, sometimes he is called the father of modern linguistics. According to him, he says that from now on, I will consider language to be a set of sentences, each finite in length and constructed out of a finite set of elements. Chomsky prioritizes sentences as the root and base of language. Right? My dear students, if we want to know the prehistory origin of language, there are so many theories and speculations that we need to know. There is a theological belief that language came from the first utterances of God, through which God addressed Adam. And we get this idea from the Genesis of Bible. And that language was Hebrew language. So Hebrew language is called the oldest form of language used by God to address Adam. But this is essentially a theological concept. And the age of spoken language, according to Stephen Anderson, is 60,000 to 100,000 years. So you can imagine from this comment of Stephen Anderson that our language is prehistory. Another important information for you is that the age of written language, is 4,000 years to 5,000 years. I have another information for you that the total number of world languages almost 5,000 to 7,000. And if we discuss the number of the speakers all over the world, we can regard 5 topmost languages in the world. At first, English. English is the topmost international language in which about 1.132 billion speakers speak across the world. And the second most important and widely spoken language is the Chinese language. And almost 1.117 billion speakers speak in Chinese language. And in the third position there is Hindi, and almost 615 million speakers speak in Hindi. And in the fourth position there is the Spanish language, and almost 534 million people speak the Spanish language. And in the fifth position there is the French language. About 280 million people all over the world speak the French language. My dear students, now I want to discuss the most important characteristics of language. My dear students, please look at the whiteboard, and I have given the characteristics of language through some points. At first, language is human, non-instinctive and symbolic. By this, I have focused 3 important characteristics of language. First of all, it is essentially human. Secondly, language is non-instinctive, that is voluntary. And thirdly, it is symbolic. We use some symbols to express our ideas, emotions, and experiences. Then, language is arbitrary, systematic, and habitual. Here are also three important aspects of language. Firstly, it is arbitrary. By this, I mean that there is no inherent relevance between the words and meaning. The words are arbitrary because they have no inherent relevant meaning. For example, in Bangla, we say bhalobasha. In English, we say love. In Latin language, we say amor. In Hindi, we say pyar. So, you can evaluate that. What is the relevant meaning between love and the meaning that we express? So, love, bhalobasha, amor, there are some different words. But what is the semantic relation of the words? So it is in fact arbitrary. We have used all these words conventionally, and it has become a system and symbolic. In fact, language is arbitrary. Then systematic. Though language is arbitrary, complex and complicated, by dint of the long evolution, we have made systems, methods to organize language. So ultimately, language has become systematic, not haphazard, disordered. And then habitual. Language is a means through which we begin to learn, acquire language. And imagine a child, when he begins to acquire a language, its mother tongue, it imitates its parents and other members of the family. And gradually, language becomes habituated. Linguistic behaviors are practiced. So language is a matter of our habit, our behavior, linguistic behavior. Again, language is conversational and communicative. Through language, we make conversation, and then we communicate with one another through language. So the main function of language is to help us communicate in a community. Language is also unique, modifiable, and creative. Language is not something stagnant, unchangeable. It is creative, changeable, modifiable. The language that we used 500 years ago is not the same that we use now. There is far difference, many changes, numerous modifications. So language is changeable, developing, progressive. Again, language is creative. Newer and newer words, sentences are created. Infinite words and sentences are created. So language is creative. Now, another important aspect of language is that it is conventional. Language has not come to us in a day or overnight. Rather, language has come to the present position through a long process of evolution. And language has become conventional, traditional. The people of Bangladesh speak Bangla. And this language has become conventional from generation to generation. Another important characteristic of language is that it is a social phenomenon. That is, there is a social interaction in language. Not only that, another important factor is that language is cultural. Language is related to our culture, our social norms. So to know language, we have to know the cultural, social phenomena. Furthermore, language is essentially oral and auditory. On the one hand, it is verbal, we utter, and the listener listen to. That is, language is verbal, vocal, and auditory. Articulatory. There is a process of articulation in language. So language is also articulatory. Then language is structurally complex and diverse. I have already mentioned that language is too complex, difficult and tough a subject to understand. Scholars are still exploring, investigating languages and their origin, their process of evolution. But still now, the scholars have not come to a single opinion or decision about this topic. Right? Now, I want to just mention, but it is not possible to discuss today. In next class, we shall discuss some other important factors that I have mentioned here, early speculations of the origin of language. there are many theories and speculations about the origin and evolution of language, and there are many theories. For example, some earliest speculations about the origin of language are: firstly, I have mentioned bow wow theory. Secondly, pew pew theory. Thirdly, ding dong theory. Then yo-yo theory, Tata theory, Eureka theory, etc. These are some speculations that have been made regarding the origin of spoken language. In some next class, I shall discuss elaborately all these theories. Not only that, there are some major approaches to the origin of language, and these approaches are very important, and the modern linguists of the world have their different opinions and concepts, and I have divided those concepts into 4 major approaches. What are those? First, continuity theory. Secondly, discontinuity theory. Thirdly, innate theory. And lastly, cultural theory. And through the discussion of these theories, we can try our best to flashback the discussion regarding the origin and evolution of language. My dear students, in this respect, I also want to mention some language families that exist throughout the world. At first, Indo-European family. Secondly, Afro-Asiatic family. Thirdly, Ural-Altai family. Fourthly, Indo-Chinese family. Niger-Congo family. Austro-Asiatic family. Malayo-Polynesian family. Australian family. Dravidian family, etc. All these are the main language families that we can find in the existing period. My dear students, today I have given you some concept about language, its origin, its definitions, and major characteristics. In the next class, I want to discuss linguistics, its definition, its different disciplines and levels. So, my dear students, all the best. See you next.